Chad Leinaweaver serves on the board of the Morristown Festival of Books, which returns on October 18th and 19th. Chad, good morning and welcome to Jersey Magazine.
Hey, good morning, Jim. Thanks so much for having me.
You have just announced the keyboard event moderator. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I have to say the thing that's always exciting about us is who we get for the Friday evening event, and it's always a usually like a fairly big name, and we've had some important people in the past. So Fareed Zakaria is who will be there this year, and it's funny. It was one of those types of things where there's always a little bit of like a negotiation. You reach out to some people and who's free and all that kind of stuff. Thankfully, he's big on CNN. And a number of us actually had been reading his book, believe it or not. It had been out for a few months. And that's always the key, right? We always want to have people at the book festival who've had something out relatively recently. And he's very erudite. And I think when he's on CNN, people are like, wow, this guy knows tons of things. But like his book is very good about being like, here's the essence of things, and about revolutions and why are there wars that still happen to this day in different parts of the world, things like that. And it's a great book.
What's the history of the Morristown Festival of Books?
It's funny you should ask that. A lot of people always think I'm also the director of the Morristown and Morris Township Library, and people always think that we control the whole festival, and we don't. Um, a little over 10 years ago, there was a grassroots effort among people who live around town, and they're like, oh, they had been to other book festivals, other places, Savannah, Georgia, other parts of the country. And we're like, we could do this here. And so it's all grassroots. It's all people who approached us. They approached the Mayo Performing Arts Center. They approached the Presbyterian and Episcopal churches on either side of us and just said, hey, what if we did something like this in multiple venues downtown? And what do you guys all think about it? And everybody was on board. And we pull in about 7 or 8,000 people each year. So it's a pretty big event.
And there is a main event, and there's also a KidFest as well. What goes on in the main event first?
Sure. So the keynote on Friday night is usually like a paid ticket. You get a copy of the book with with your ticket. That essentially is your ticket in a lot of ways. And then on Saturday, everything is free. So we have main authors from YA, thriller authors, nonfiction authors, other fiction authors on Saturday, and those are usually in the inside venues around Morristown. And then KidFest is all outside in the tent on the lawn of St. Peter's. So it's a bunch of different kid authors. Mary Pope Osborne, who wrote the I'm aware of blanking on it here for the Magic Treehouse, which a lot of people, I know my kids knew it. She will be one of the authors, but the kids can come right in, walk through the tent, and actually meet these authors and talk to them. And there'll be a couple of sessions for them too. But we found that it's kind of useful for the kids and authors to be able to talk like face to face as much as possible.
I do baseball instruction on the side in addition to radio, and I was working with a young 7-year-old boy the other day, and he was very talkative. I couldn't get over because usually they're kind of quiet and you get 1 and 2 word answers, especially the first time you're working with them, as this was. So I was asking him what he does and what positions he plays and that things like that. And asked him what grade he was in, and I said, what's your favorite subject in school? And you can't say lunch or recess because that's the first thing they always say. And he looked, and without skipping a beat, Chad, he said, reading. And I almost never hear that from kids. I said, you like to read? He said, I love to read. And I thought, what? That is so great. He's probably just learned to read in the last year, maybe year and a half or so. And he's just savoring it. And it's so important. 2 of my 3 kids liked to read. The third one, not so much. You always know the importance of it, but he wasn't a big fan of it. But it was so refreshing to hear a little 7-year-old boy go, reading.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have to say, I have tons of people who would say like, oh, my word, my kids can't get off their devices left and right and blah, blah, blah. And there's a place for that as long as they're not on it all day long. And what I find is that there's a whole slew of kids out there. They come into the library all the time. They come to the book festival. They come to KidFest. And there's a lot of them. It's like, wow, there are a lot of kids that enjoy reading, and that's great. So I don't think that's an isolated case.
And you mentioned devices. I read the New York Times on my phone. So yeah, I'm looking at my device, but I'm reading. I don't know the last time I bought a physical newspaper. I buy books all the time. And I think, in doing this show and some other interviews for WDHA, I've probably read more books in the last 2 years than I had in the previous 10.
Right. Oh, that's what happens too. I used to be on a whether we have book clubs here at the library or if you're on an author panel. I'm a moderator for one of our authors this year, so I'm reading his book. And it's true, those types of things force you into reading different things. But we have patrons who we actually just got through a summer reading program. There's one woman who, over the course of 6 weeks, read 50 some books.
Wow.
Just like, oh my word,
Wow.
where do you have the time for that? But she did, so that was great.
And I do find that although a lot of books that are sent to me by authors come in a PDF form, so I'm reading it on a tablet or on my laptop, I find I much prefer actually holding a book in my hands.
Yeah, a lot of people say that as well. And you know what I have found is I think for a lot of people, they just want it how they can get it. So if they can get a physical copy, great. If they can get it electronically, great. Whatever's fastest. Oh, I just heard about this. I want to read it. So that's good. They're reading. That's the important thing. But it's nice to be able to kind of mix up between print and electronic.
And you mentioned the Morristown Library a couple of times. As we have moved to a more digital age, how has that affected the library?
It's just a pivot for us, right? I remember years ago, I'm going to date myself. I was in library school and I remember like the professors there sort of saying like, "Oh, I remember when we changed and microfilm was the latest technology." And I was like, "Oh man, whatever." But it's just that's all it is, right? So it's like we actually have streaming services that people subscribe to that they just put their library card in. They can view things on Canopy or the shelf and things like that. And we have obviously electronic system that we share throughout Maine Library Alliance, which is our consortium of libraries here in this area. And so people can get electronic copies, they can get e-audio copies they play through their phone, but they can also come in, and we still have people that will borrow, DVDs or Blu-rays of films and things like that. So for us, it's more of a matter of like, all right, who wants what and what format should we get it in?
I live in Madison and we're part of that sharing system that you just mentioned. And that is wonderful.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's really great. I have to say, I think a lot of library systems do that because invariably, we might be buying a lot of books on astronomy, but Madison may be buying a lot of books on chemistry or whatever. So that way you're not having to buy all the same things. You have to buy a lot of popular fiction books, but outside of that, you can kind of spread resources around a little bit better, which is great.
Chad, for WDHA and WMTR listeners who want to learn more about the Morristown Festival of Books or get involved, where can they go?
Well, Morristownbooks.org is probably the best place to go. We get lots of calls here at the library, so you can always call us and we'll fill you in on all that type of thing. I think the important thing to understand is that the Saturday event's free. You can just show up. It's in a bunch of different institutions here, right downtown around the library. And but that's probably the best place to go to learn. That usually any kind of schedule will get released here in the next couple of weeks regarding like what authors will be at what venue and at what time.
And again, it's the Morristown Festival of Books, October 18th and 19th. Morristownbooks.org is the place to go. Chad Leinaweaver, thank you for your time this morning and best of luck with this year's event.
Hey, thanks, Jim. I really appreciate it being on.